A direct order from a commanding officer is not a suggestion. It is not a debate. It is absolute. You follow it or you face consequences that can destroy your entire life. When Lieutenant Colonel Frank Hastings told Corporal Jake Sullivan to leave the cat behind, it was not cruelty. It was military necessity. Sullivan had 3 seconds to decide. Obey the order and live with the guilt, or disobey and risk everything he had worked for. What he chose next would haunt both men for years. Subscribe right now, because this story will force you to question everything you believe about right and wrong. Comment what city and country you are watching from. Hit that like button, because this story needs to reach millions. This is the story of Corporal Jake Sullivan, the cat he could not abandon, and the choice that cost him everything. Camp Leatherneck, Helmand Province, Afghanistan, March 2013. The base was preparing for closure. After 12 years of war, the United States was finally pulling out. Soldiers were packing equipment, dismantling structures, shipping containers were being loaded daily. Everything that could not be transported was being destroyed. Nothing could be left for the enemy to use. The base that once housed thousands now felt like a ghost town. Empty buildings, quiet streets, the end of something that had defined a generation. Corporal Jake Sullivan had been at Leatherneck for 9 months. He was 26 years old. From Sacramento, California, Marine Corps Infantry, 3rd Deployment. He had seen combat in Iraq twice before Afghanistan. He was good at his job, disciplined, followed orders, never caused problems. The kind of Marine that officers could rely on without question. He planned to make the Corps a career, maybe go officer himself eventually. Everything was going according to plan. Then he found Copper. Copper was a cat, orange and white, long-haired, maybe 2 years old. Sullivan found him in an abandoned supply building during a routine check. The cat was thin but not starving, skittish but not feral. Someone had been feeding him. Probably local workers who came on base, but those workers were gone now. The base was shutting down. Copper had been left behind like everything else deemed non-essential. Sullivan should have walked away, should have let nature handle it. But he stopped, knelt down, extended his hand. Copper approached cautiously, sniffed his fingers, let Sullivan touch his head. Sullivan felt something shift. He had been in country for 9 months. 9 months of sand and heat and constant vigilance. 9 months without touching anything soft, without feeling anything that was not hard or violent or necessary. Copper was none of those things. Copper was just a cat who needed help. Sullivan started bringing food, scraps from the mess hall, water in a canteen cup. Copper started waiting for him, started running to meet him when Sullivan approached. Within a week, Copper was following Sullivan everywhere he went on base, sleeping outside his barracks, sitting near him during downtime. Other Marines noticed. Some laughed, said Sullivan had gone soft. Others understood. Specialist Marcus Grant said, "That cat is keeping you sane." Sullivan said, "Maybe." Grant said, "Do not get too attached. We are leaving in 3 weeks. You cannot bring him home." Sullivan said, "I know." But he was already attached, already planning, already thinking about impossibilities. Sullivan researched, found organizations that transported animals from war zones, but they needed time, months of paperwork, thousands of dollars, health certificates, export permits, import permits, vaccinations, quarantine periods. The logistical chain was enormous, and Sullivan had 3 weeks, not 3 months. 3 weeks, not enough time, not enough money, not enough of anything. But he could not accept that, could not accept leaving Copper behind to starve or be killed, or just disappear like he never mattered. He started the process anyway. Contacted an organization called Paws of War. Explained the situation. They said they could try but no guarantees. They would need $4,000 upfront. Sullivan had $800 in savings. He called his mother, explained everything. She said, "Jake, you cannot save every animal." He said, "I am not trying to save every animal. Just this one." She wired him $1,500. His sister sent $300. A friend from high school sent $100. Sullivan was still $1,000 short. He posted on a military forum, explained the situation. Donations trickled in. $50, $20, $100. People he never met sending money because they understood, because they had been there, because they knew what it felt like to find something worth saving in hell. 10 days before base closure, Sullivan had the money, had the organization ready, had a plan. Copper would be transported to Kabul, would stay with a foster family while paperwork processed, would fly to the United States in 8 weeks. Sullivan would be home by then, would pick Copper up in California. It was possible, difficult but possible. Sullivan allowed himself to hope, started imagining Copper in his apartment, started imagining normal life with something that reminded him not everything had to be hard. Then Lieutenant Colonel Hastings found out. Hastings was 48 years old, career Marine, 26 years of service, veteran of Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan. He was not cruel, not heartless, but he was a realist. He understood that military operations functioned on discipline and order, that exceptions created chaos, that one soldier smuggling an animal created precedent for others to try the same. He called Sullivan to his office. Hastings said, "Corporal Sullivan, I understand you have been attempting to transport a local animal back to the United States." Sullivan's stomach dropped. He said, "Yes, sir. I have been working with an organization. Everything is legal. I am not using military resources." Hastings nodded. He said, "I appreciate that you are following proper channels, but I am ordering you to cease this effort immediately. The cat stays here." Sullivan felt his chest tighten. He said, "Sir, with respect, I have already paid for transport. The organization is ready. The cat will die if we leave him." Hastings leaned forward. He said, "Corporal, we are closing this base. I have 800 Marines to relocate. I have millions of dollars in equipment to transport or destroy. I have security concerns. I have diplomatic concerns. I have 1,000 problems that actually matter. I do not have time or resources to facilitate pet adoptions. The cat stays. That is an order." Sullivan tried to argue, said it would not impact operations, said everything was already arranged, said he was using personal funds. Hastings cut him off. He said, "You are not hearing me. This is not a discussion. This is a direct order. You will cease all efforts to transport that animal. You will not use military communication systems to coordinate with civilian organizations. You will not allocate any time or resources to this matter when we leave this base. That cat stays behind. Do you understand?" Sullivan wanted to scream, wanted to argue, wanted to explain that Copper was not just a cat, was something that made 9 months of hell bearable, was something innocent that deserved protection. But you do not argue with a lieutenant colonel. You say yes, sir, and you obey. Sullivan said, "Yes, sir, I understand." He left the office, walked back to his barracks, sat on his bunk. Copper was sleeping on his pillow. Sullivan looked at him, thought about the order, thought about his career, thought about 26 years of service if he followed Hastings, thought about how many more deployments he could survive, thought about going home and explaining to people that he left Copper behind because orders were orders, thought about whether he could live with that. Grant found him there, said, "You okay?" Sullivan said, "Hastings ordered me to leave Copper." Grant was quiet. Then he said, "You going to obey?" Sullivan did not answer. Grant said, "If you disobey a direct order, they will court-martial you. Dishonorable discharge. You lose everything." Sullivan said, "I know." Grant said, "Is a cat worth that?" Sullivan looked at Copper, looked at Grant, said, "I do not know. But I know I cannot leave him." Sullivan spent 2 days weighing options, 2 days of barely sleeping, barely eating, running scenarios. Every scenario ended badly. If he obeyed, Copper died. If he disobeyed, his career died. There was no option where everyone won, no clever solution, just a choice between 2 kinds of loss. On the 3rd day, Sullivan made his decision. He was going to disobey. He was going to save Copper. He was going to face whatever consequences came after, because some things mattered more than careers. Some promises mattered more than orders. He contacted Paws of War, told them to proceed, told them nothing had changed. They said they needed to pick up copper in 5 days. Sullivan said fine. He would make it happen. He started planning, started figuring out how to get copper off base without anyone noticing, started accepting that this was the end of everything he had worked for. But at least it would be the end for the right reason. For days before base closure, Sullivan told Grant what he was doing. Grant said, "You are insane. They will destroy you." Sullivan said, "I know." Grant said, "Let me help." Sullivan said, "No. You have a future. Do not throw it away for this." Grant said, "You are my friend. If you are doing this, I am helping. That is not negotiable." Sullivan felt his throat tighten, said, "Thank you." Grant said, "Do not thank me yet. We still have to actually pull this off." The plan was simple. On extraction day, when all Marines were loading onto transports, Sullivan would hide copper in his personal duffel bag, would sedate him lightly to keep him quiet, would carry him through checkpoints, would hand him off to a Paws of War representative waiting outside the base perimeter. It was insane. It was impossible. It was the only option. Grant would create a distraction at the checkpoint, would cause enough chaos that Sullivan could slip through without thorough inspection. They rehearsed it mentally, went over every detail, every possible failure point. It was still probably going to fail, but they were doing it anyway. The night before extraction, Sullivan sat with copper, said, "Tomorrow everything changes. For both of us. I hope I am making the right choice. I hope you are worth destroying my life over." Copper purred, had no idea what was coming, had no idea that one human was about to sacrifice everything for him. Sullivan barely slept, just lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about his mother, his sister, his future that was about to disappear, thinking about whether courage and stupidity were the same thing. Morning came too fast. It was time. Extraction day, March 28th, 0500 hours. The base was chaos. Marines loading gear, trucks moving constantly, helicopters landing and taking off. Everything orchestrated, but barely controlled. Sullivan gave Copper half a sedative pill hidden in food, just enough to keep him drowsy, not enough to be dangerous. Copper ate it, started getting sleepy within 20 minutes. Sullivan placed him carefully in the bottom of his duffel bag, surrounded him with clothes for padding, left small gaps for airflow, zipped it mostly closed, left a 2-inch gap. Copper did not move, just lay there breathing slowly. Grant appeared, said, "You ready?" Sullivan said, "No, but we are doing it anyway." They walked toward the loading area. Sullivan carried his duffel over his shoulder, tried to walk naturally, tried not to look suspicious. His heart was pounding so hard he thought everyone could hear it. They reached the first checkpoint. A sergeant was checking names against a roster. Sullivan gave his name. The sergeant checked it off, waved him through. No inspection. Sullivan kept walking. First checkpoint cleared. Second checkpoint was vehicle loading. Marines were putting duffel bags into trucks. A corporal was supervising. He looked at Sullivan, said, "Bag in the truck." "Corporal," Sullivan said, "this one has personal electronics. I need to keep it with me." The corporal looked annoyed, said, "Everything goes in the truck." Sullivan said, "Sergeant Grant can verify. I have authorization to carry personal items." He was lying, hoping the chaos would prevent verification. The corporal looked at Grant. Grant nodded confidently, said, "He is good. Let him through." The corporal waved them on. Second checkpoint cleared. Third checkpoint was the base exit gate. This was the dangerous one. Military police were inspecting random bags for contraband, weapons, drugs, anything that should not leave. Sullivan saw 2 MPs pulling Marines aside, opening bags, going through everything. Sullivan's hands were sweating. If they opened his bag, it was over. Copper would be discovered. Sullivan would be arrested immediately. Everything would end right there. Grant stepped forward, approached one of the MPs, said loudly, "Hey, I think I saw someone throw something over the perimeter fence. Might be contraband." The MP looked at him, said, "Where?" Grant pointed, said, "North side, near Tower 3. I saw it from the truck." The MP radioed his partner. Both started walking toward the fence. Grant had created the opening. Sullivan moved quickly, walked through the gate. No one stopped him. No one checked. He was outside the base, outside military jurisdiction. He kept walking, did not look back, did not stop until he was 200 meters away. A civilian van was parked on the road. A woman got out. She said, "Corporal Sullivan?" Sullivan said, "Yes." She said, "I am Rebecca from Paws of War. Do you have the cat?" Sullivan set down his duffel, unzipped it. Copper was still asleep. Rebecca lifted him out carefully, said, "He looks healthy. You did good." Sullivan said, "Just get him home, please." Rebecca said, "We will, I promise." She placed Copper in a carrier in the van, gave Sullivan paperwork, said, "He will be in Kabul by tonight. You will get updates weekly." Sullivan nodded, could not speak. Rebecca said, "What you did took real courage." Sullivan said, "Or real stupidity." Rebecca smiled, said, "Sometimes those are the same thing." She drove away. Sullivan watched the van disappear, felt hollow, felt relieved, felt terrified of what came next. Grant appeared, said, "You actually did it, you insane bastard. You actually did it." Sullivan said, "Now comes the hard part." Grant said, "What hard part?" "You are done. You are going home." Sullivan said, "Hastings will find out. He will know I disobeyed." Grant said, "How?" "Copper is gone. There is no evidence. You never officially had a cat. There are no records. Hastings cannot prove anything." Sullivan wanted to believe that, wanted to believe he could get away with it. But he knew better. Hastings was not stupid. Hastings would figure it out. And when he did, there would be consequences. The flight back to the United States was 14 hours. Sullivan barely registered it. Just sat there thinking about what he had done, thinking about whether it was worth it, thinking about his future. He landed at Camp Pendleton in California, processed through, was told he had 2 weeks, leave before reporting for duty. He went home to Sacramento. His mother hugged him, said, "You look tired." He said, "I am." She said, "Did you save the cat?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Was it worth it?" He said, "Ask me in a year." 3 days later, Sullivan got a call. "Report to base immediately." He knew what it meant. He drove to Pendleton, was escorted to an office. Lieutenant Colonel Hastings was there, also a captain from legal, also a master sergeant. Sullivan stood at attention. Hastings said, "Sit down, Corporal." Sullivan sat. Hastings said, "I am going to ask you a direct question. I expect an honest answer. Did you transport an animal off Camp Leatherneck against my direct order?" Sullivan could lie, could deny everything, could force them to prove it, but he was tired of lying, tired of hiding. He said, "Yes, sir, I did." The room was silent. Hastings looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "You understand you disobeyed a direct order from a superior officer. You understand that as a court-martial offense. You understand I can end your career right now." Sullivan said, "Yes, sir, I understand." Hastings said, "Why did you do it?" Sullivan thought about the answer, thought about all the complicated reasons. Finally he said, "Because leaving him behind was wrong, sir. And sometimes doing the right thing means disobeying orders." Hastings leaned back, said, "I have been in the Corps for 26 years. I have seen Marines do heroic things, brave things, stupid things, but I have never seen someone throw away their career for a cat." The captain spoke up, said, "Sir, we have grounds for court-martial, Article 92, failure to obey order. Recommend we proceed." Hastings was quiet. Then he said, "What would we gain? The cat is already in the United States. The base is closed. The mission is complete. Court-martialing Corporal Sullivan accomplishes nothing except ruining a good Marine's life over an animal." The captain said, "Sir, it sets precedent. It tells other Marines they can disobey orders if they disagree." Hastings said, "Or it tells them that compassion still matters, that we are still human beings even in uniform." He looked at Sullivan, said, "You put me in an impossible position, Corporal. I gave you a direct order. You disobeyed. I should court-martial you, but I am not going to." The captain started to protest. Hastings held up his hand, said, "However, there will be consequences. You are being given a non-judicial punishment. Article 15, reduction in rank, forfeiture of half pay for 2 months, letter of reprimand in your permanent record. You will never make sergeant. You will never be promoted beyond where you are now. Your career is effectively over. Do you accept this punishment? Sullivan said, Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Hastings said, Do not thank me. You disobeyed a direct order. You betrayed my trust. The only reason you are not in the brig is because I respect that you owned it, that you did not lie, that you stood by your choice. But make no mistake, you destroyed your future for a cat. I hope that was worth it. Sullivan said, Time will tell. Sir. Hastings dismissed him. Sullivan walked out. Grant was waiting. Said, What happened? Sullivan said, Article 15. Reduction in rank. Pay cut. Career over. Grant said, Could have been worse. Sullivan said, Could have been better. Grant said, Would you do it again? Sullivan thought about it. Said, Yes, I would. 8 weeks later, Cop arrived in California. Sullivan picked him up at the cargo facility. Copper recognized him immediately, meowed, ran to him. Sullivan held him, felt the weight of what he had given up, felt the weight of what he had saved, wondered if the trade was fair, brought Copper home, set up food and water, watched Copper explore the apartment, watched him settle on the couch like he owned the place. Sullivan sat next to him, said, You better be worth it. You better be worth everything I lost. Sullivan left the Marines 6 months later. His contract ended. He was offered re-enlistment. He declined. Without promotion potential, there was no point. He became a civilian for the first time in 8 years. Got a job as a security contractor. Decent pay, no future, no pride, no brotherhood, just a job. He was bitter for a while, angry at Hastings, angry at the system, angry at himself for choosing a cat over everything he worked for. Then one night, Sullivan had a panic attack. First one since leaving Afghanistan. Felt like he was dying, could not breathe, could not think. Copper appeared, jumped on his chest, started purring, pressed his head against Sullivan's face. The purring was loud, rhythmic. Sullivan focused on it, focused on breathing in time with the purring. Slowly, the panic faded. Slowly, he came back. Copper stayed there until Sullivan fell asleep. When Sullivan woke up, he realized something. Copper had not just been saved. Copper was saving him back. 3 years later, Sullivan is doing better, has a new job, construction management, good pay, good people. He still thinks about the Marines sometimes, still wonders what rank he would be now if he had obeyed, still wonders if his career would have been worth more than this. But then he looks at Copper. Copper is 5 years old now, healthy, happy, still follows Sullivan everywhere, still sleeps on his chest, still purrs when Sullivan is stressed. And Sullivan thinks maybe he did not lose everything. Maybe he just traded one kind of future for another. Hastings retired last year. Sullivan sent him a letter, said, Sir, I know I disappointed you. I know I failed you as a Marine. But I wanted you to know that Copper is alive and healthy, and I am too. I do not know if that matters to you, but it matters to me. Thank you for not destroying me completely. You could have. You chose mercy. I will never forget that. Hastings wrote back, said, Corporal Sullivan, you did not fail me. You made a choice. I disagreed with that choice, but I respect that you owned it. I hope that cat was worth it. Semper Fi. Sullivan keeps that letter, reads it sometimes, still does not know if Hastings forgives him, but it helps to know Hastings understands. Was Sullivan right to disobey? Was Copper worth a career? Was compassion worth insubordination? Or was it just emotion clouding judgment? Hastings gave a lawful order. Sullivan broke faith with military discipline. The system only works if everyone follows orders. But the system also depends on humans who remember why they fight, who remember that protecting innocent things still matters. Sullivan chose the cat, chose conscience over career, lost rank, lost future, lost everything he planned, but gained something he did not know he needed. You tell me if that was the right choice.